Welcome to the Concert Queen Connect. I'm so excited. I'm cheesing really hard because I have the one and only Kalu James here with me today. Say hello.
Hi.
So he's also part of your group, Kalu
and the Electric Joint.
Yeah. It's a mouthful.
Say that 5 times.
Exactly. But you sometimes, because I've seen individual performances of you, and I think the last time I saw you perform was with David Ramirez. The Sunset Sessions.
Oh yeah, love
which
David.
Was a really special performance. I think I cried. I don't know if I told you that because it was so moving. Like you're so moving when you're on stage, and you can really feel your presence and feel your voice when you're singing.
Thank you.
So, I know I just showered you with a bunch of.
I'm absolutely taking it. Where's the pin to bust the bubble?
Well, you just got back from Hawaii.
I did.
So happy belated birthday.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Was that your big birthday plan?
That was it. It was, I like most people, I spent it literally by myself. And I just knew that I wasn't going to do that this year.
Yeah.
And I knew that the airlines were hurting. And there were all these amazing deals coming out with Escape_ATX.
Yeah.
So I just literally kept looking at those.
Really?
And I found a round trip ticket for like $282. So, I clicked buy on that. And that was it.
Was
I was
there
just
a catch? Was there
there was nothing.
No leg room?
No, there was none of that. There was they were just more like, hey, you need your money because there's no one flying right now. So I grabbed it, and just the way things happen, it's like you start one thing and then you begin to have conversations with people. A friend of mine was going to go with me, and then 2 days, and then my friend Greg Janikis, who was one of your past guests here, jumped on it. And then my friend that I was going to go with, her daughter fell off a haystack and broke her arm. So I was thankful that Greg was there, and all of a sudden Kelsey Wilson from Sir Woman was I want to go too. So all of a sudden I had this whole crew of people who had never been to Hawaii. They were so excited, and it was just the best of time. It's paradise. It's like,
yeah. So which islands did you go to? I've went to Hawaii once. I went for 2 weeks on this eat, pray, love, very expensive eat, pray, because I did not catch a deal. I just wanted to go, but oh my God, I went to, I think, Oahu, Kauai for a day, and then Big Island.
Nice. Yeah, I was in Oahu and then Kauai for 5 days. The whole plan was, just island hop, because the tickets are $49 or so.
Wow.
But it is a pandemic going on, if you haven't heard. And I just realized that we had to take COVID tests, even though we're fully vaccinated. Had to take COVID tests every island you flew to. So with that being said, we just ended up staying in Kauai for 5 days, which I was so thankful for. I wouldn't have wanted to leave anytime. We just snorkeled and ate the best seafoods that exist, and just looked for waterfalls and did a lot of cooking and a lot of just walking around, and I don't know, just more present than we've had a whole year of, depending on who you're talking to. For me, it's just been a lot more presence than I have in a long time. So to be able to just do that, unplug, and knowing fully well that there are these lines of shows coming up, it just kind of felt like the right, I just realized that I am here right now, and I'm going to remember this for a long ass time. Oh, and awesome. The best thing to do is just be thankful to be there with my friends, and knowing fully well that it's also a privilege. It's a privilege and a luxury right now to travel in it. So I didn't even bat 1 second about needing to pay an extra, whatever, $200 or whatever for a COVID test to do what you need to do, because I know a lot of people can't even afford to do that. So, and given the history of Hawaii, it just made sense that everyone's cautious. It was, here you walk around, and of course, people have masks and people don't have masks. There, every single place you go to, people are masked up, and which is the reason why there's only been 400 cases.
I didn't know that.
There's only been 400 cases. It might have been lower than that.
Wow.
So
just
it's
and that's see, it's statistics like that. When you see that, you're like, okay, there's something to this, and people, despite them wanting to fight it, yeah. And Kauai's history. I'm trying to think of the different islands because Kauai has all. Is it the dogs, or there's like wild horses, or there's some, or maybe that's Big Island, but there's like wild. There's just tons of. Or
there are roosters everywhere. There are roosters
I was like,
everywhere.
I know there's something wild. So, yes, it's roosters.
There are roosters
y'all been to Hawaii,
everywhere.
but they're...
And that's one of the things you realize, that there are no predators. Like, as in, there are no snakes in Hawaii. There are no raccoons. There are no possums. There are no deers. I mean, like literally, other than, whatever is coming in from the ocean, and sun poisoning or centipedes or whatever, and your dumbass self doing some dumb shit.
Yeah.
Like, other than that, there really is nothing else. So it just fosters this spirit of adventure. And I'm from Nigeria, and I when it comes to, like, y'all call it, going out to, I don't know, I call it going to the bush. Like I'm not messing with the bush. I'm not messing with the jungle. There's just literally so many other factors that you have to account for. So to be in a place that was that beautiful, that lush, and I didn't have to worry about nothing.
Just got to be present.
Yeah, I just literally walked around and just can pluck papayas from. I mean, we were having one of my friends is a yoga instructor, and we're doing yoga one of the days, and in the middle of it, just a coconut just drops on the floor. I'm like, here's my coconut. There's lunch right there. Yeah, it was. I don't think I'm gonna forget that for a long while.
Yeah, it sounds even like the way you talk about it. It's a magical place.
It sure is.
I made a point when I was there, because I went by myself, and when I was there, it was literally just to unplug. And I remember just taking notes and being like, I'm so hyper present. I was so like, this is what really matters, is nature.
Mm-hmm.
And yesterday was Earth Day. So it's just really like being present is amazing. But I do want to talk about, you touched on it, that you're from Nigeria.
Yes, I am.
And so then, just being at one with nature, but then also being from Nigeria, how did what was that experience like? Because compared to here, like people that have never been to West Africa.
Yeah, it's a different world, Mm-hmm. It's an absolute different world. I was there till 18, then moved to the US, and growing up there, back in the early 80s, 90s, I always tell people, if you can, there's so much more I know of the United States because the biggest export is the music, the culture, all these things. So you kind of have an idea of what to expect. But if you're 18-year-old American going to Nigeria, I think you might lose your mind for a long time.
Really?
Like the idea that you can, like your light doesn't work, the water doesn't, it's not running, there street lights or stop signs or traffic lights or anything like that. Doesn't exist. I mean, it exists in certain places, but it's pretty much the known that it's not functioning. It will take you a second to get used to it. So for me coming here, I knew a little bit of what to expect coming here. But it's still one of those things where, as a kid, what you know is what you know. And what I knew was perfectly fine, and I was okay with that. And I go home a lot. I go home like once my mom still lives there.
Oh, okay.
So I go home once every 2 years. I try to get there. But it's definitely a different upbringing than here. And a lot of Nigerians, I can only speak for Nigerians, but I know that a lot of Africans and actually a lot of immigrants do this, where when your kid gets to middle school, they send you back to spend the next 3 years between middle school through high school.
Really? So
that you understand the difference. You understand when you come back here, you're still grateful for all the things that you took for granted. It's a known thing.
Oh my goodness.
Where it just gives you that reality, like shake, like, hey, listen, people have it way worse than you do. and with social media, a lot of things have mixed. That's the thing. Like when I moved here, I almost lost all connections with my friends. But my brother lives here now, and he has a very different experience because there are all these ways to connect with people, so you can still keep up and you can understand what's going on. And so much has changed from when I lived there to now. So much has changed. So it's it's I love it. I love going home. I love getting to unplug. The 7-hour difference is a thing. Huge thing, which is one thing in Hawaii as well, was that it was 5 hours in the past, and I got a kick out of that because for some reason I guess you think it's it's another state in the United States, so you don't, but at the same time how it became United States is a whole different story altogether. But it is 5 hours. It is a 5-hour difference. Yeah.
Wow. So having home, and I know I read somewhere that you were in the choir. So how did music, how did that play an influence in your life growing up over there?
It was everything. It's the society where you don't talk back at all. And choir and music became my place to just go and yell really loudly.
Just you push. So soft-spoken.
I am very soft-spoken, and until I get on stage, and then there's a light, there's a light switch that comes on or goes off, whichever way you want to use that analogy. But music became everything for me. I was never pushed to it. I just have always loved singing. I've always loved the ability to be almost to the point of not cognizant of where you are at that moment. That's my experience with when I sing, is sometimes, and I don't like watching footages whatsoever of what I did because I lived it. But at the same time, when I do see those, I have so many friends and so many artists that can tell you every move. I feel like I had this conversation with Milat where she was really present and knows what's happening. I don't. It's interesting. I just go somewhere. I go somewhere, and it's somewhere that I have been waiting all week or a month, or given this pandemic, literally there's a lot of backup, to get to. But it was just that one place where nothing else really didn't matter except what I was doing at that moment. And choir became my thing. I wanted to sing all the parts, everything. And that's a problem if you've ever been in choir, because you're supposed to, assume this position. You're a tenor, alto, soprano.
I actually auditioned for choir and I did not make it. They're like, no, ma'am, you can go back to the band or something else that's not involved with your voice.
Were you in the band then?
I don't even think I was in the band. My parents were like, no, we don't want to hear a saxophone. Trying to think what I did besides sports, but
I did sports too.
Yeah.
That was my dad was so convinced that he was going to turn one of his kids into a cash cow one way or the other. And for him, how
many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have 2 brothers and a sister.
Okay.
I'm the oldest of 4. And it was,
so it started with you.
It was me.
Like, here we go.
There was
all
nothing.
In on you, and then we'll go. Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was
I know what that's like. I was the oldest too.
Yeah. So you totally get that. You have to set the example and do all these things. My mom has been here because my sister just had a baby right before the pandemic. And my mom got here in December, and she's been here for the past, 5 months or so. And it's been great to have her around and get to talk to her. But I literally told her, I said, Mom, y'all spent the money on the wrong thing. You should have been in music and not in tennis lessons and swimming lessons and basketball lessons. It was all these things of just come on, it's got to be something. And it was the arts the whole time.
And do you look at it in hindsight? Because I know sometimes I'm because I don't have kids, but I think I'm wow, my parents put so much into me doing all these different things. And I'm wow, if I had a kid, would I push them to do this, like you said, tennis. I had every kind of piano lessons. That was the kind of the crossroads for me. Where parents were okay, piano, and I loved piano. I was getting really good at it, or sports. And then they're well, you know, do you want to be the person that's cheering or the person that they're cheering for? And I'm like, so that's what you tell your kids if you want them to play sports. Because I was like, all right, buy a piano. I'm going to go play sports now. But it's such a commitment on the parents' side. Like I go back, I tell my parents, I'm like, thank you. Because picking you up from school or doing these different things. And I mean, it was just like you said. And then it's so funny because I wanted to do broadcasting, but I kept going back into like business or sports. And it's like I never, and then here I am.
Here you are. At the end of it, finally, it always finds you.
It finds you.
It always finds you.
That's so interesting. So you're singing different parts and just learning everything you could.
Learn everything I could. And, and you know, after a while, that was just, I got kicked out of the choir just because number one, I
kicked out of the choir.
I got kicked out of choir. I sure did got kicked out of choir.
Jordan getting cut from like the 7th grade basketball team.
I got kicked out of the choir. I just couldn't stay in one lane. I just wanted to sing everything. And also, I mean, like the last straw that broke the camel's back was it's called secular music, you know, Casey and JoJo, Jodeci, R. Kelly, all these things, like listening to all that music was just, you know, it was the devil's music. And that was a no-no.
Were you singing that in choir?
I wasn't, but you know, like, you know how the church is, like there are eyes everywhere. Everyone is paying attention. Everyone is. So I guess the word got back, and I was quite thankful for it because I ended up just forming like a little a cappella group with like 3 of my friends. I was like, to hell with y'all. Like, we're going to do this.
And JoJo.
Yeah. I'm like, here.
Kalu and
yeah.
What's that? Kalu and JoJo.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
Ended up doing that and like, you know, playing little events, you know, show up and actually have, it was funny because would be able to go to other churches and perform as this group, this 4-piece a cappella group, which is so much more fun than trying to wear some certain garment and sing the hymns and all these things, which is a beautiful, I get to relive that like in a few days, I think May 1st, because I'm doing something with David Ramirez. He had released this, he had called me during the pandemic. He's like, I'm really thinking of doing this hymn record called Backslider, which is a beautiful name. And it's all hymns that we all kind of grew up with because he grew up in the church as well.
Oh, wow.
And I got to sing harmonies in 3 of those, but I got to relive a lot of those. And I think he's doing a show of May 1st with like Ruthie Foster and Kelsey Wilson from Fort Star Women, Walker Lukens and Nikki, like all these. And I got to sing. I wasn't allowed to sing like the low voices because I was told back then as a kid, they're just like, dude, I know you want to sing everything, but your voice is not too low for this. And it's kind of one of those things where they tell you can't do it. And then it becomes broadcast and like this, you're going to do it at the end of the day. It's become one of my favorite things is because I sing so high in my vocal range that I can absolutely come really, really low. And I love doing that in like all the albums we put out. But it felt so good to actually finally do that in a hymn and just sing the lowest, the guttural of the lows as you can, you know?
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So we're doing that, I think, May 1st. But yeah, music is always, it's even when I was moving here, you know.
Yeah. So what kind of, you know, like you said, you're in the choir, going to school there. So at 18, was it your whole family that moved here, or like what kind of was the catalyst for that change? It
was me. It was just me. That whole story of having having people who send their kids back during middle school. I met my like high school sweetheart then. She was Nigerian American, moved to back to Nigeria during that point in time. And we like fell in love and like got married and moved to the US.
Wow.
As young, my mom got married when she was 18. So I grew up in a household where, you know, you really could do anything. So, here I am, 18-year-old kid in a whole new world, hell identity crisis.
Did you move
but
to
married.
Austin?
No, moved to New York.
Okay, New York.
Moved to New York. Which I call some of those years, the first 2 years, I call like my sleeper years, because it was just, I was, had to live the dream of an immigrant, which is like, you go to school, you get this degree, you have to send money home, all these things. I have this partner, which didn't last. But yeah, I moved here at 18, married, a whole different life that was set in front of me. And just, it's not rebellious, it's just who I am. I just knew that music is exactly what I was going to do. And I had to go to school to get my parents off my back so that I can do what I need to do.
Yeah.
And I fell, head over heel 100% for music, because I didn't really see myself doing anything else at that point in time. And I just knew that you need all this. It takes a lot of sacrifice. It takes a lot of, bending your back. It takes a lot of turning the other cheek. It takes this focus to keep going forward. That might not be the case for a lot of people, but I think it is the case for most people. Mm-hmm. And I just put everything I knew into it. But that also meant that I had to do all these, I was working a desk job, and, wow. I think when you are an artist, as you wear so many hats, and there are certain images you present or you push forward, but the reality is there's so much happening behind the scenes.
Exactly.
And that has always been it for me. It's constantly, there is something else. There's some other cookie jar that I'm putting my hand into to keep moving forward.
Yeah. So how did you push on? Because I know I want to talk about that for a little bit, because I do feel, especially now in society, everything's just instant gratification. Mm-hmm. Everybody thinks that this just happens overnight, mm-hmm. or they're like, I want to get where you are. I want to do what you're doing. And like you said, there's all this stuff going on behind the scenes. So like, what advice would you tell someone that's, on that same path? I'm sure you've probably given this advice, but like, what would you tell that person who's aspiring? You
don't like, no one really ever sees, no one tells your story. No one sees what you see of yourself. And sometimes it's a waste of time trying to explain that, except just doing it. I'm one of those people where advisors, I'm just like, well, I don't really know you. I don't understand where you're coming from. So I'm not sure how to, but for me, I just knew that no one was ever going to give anything to me. That's how I was raised in a society of show your work. You had that whole time where you have the math problem and you have the teacher saying, yes, the answer is 5. However, I'm going to deduct 2 points because you didn't show me how you got to 5. That's how I grew up in a boarding school from the age of 9 to 16.
Wow.
And, think of a 9-year-old in a boarding school where it really felt like prison meets the mafia, I
wasn't going to use those 2 words, but okay.
It truly really? Did feel, yeah, those hierarchies, they were, yeah, it felt, it's like Lord of the Flies. It was just so much like that, where where you stand in the totem pole. And I feel like that has shaped a lot of my life, because I am more aware than I let out.
Interesting.
I can have all these opinions, but I don't really feel like until it's asked. There really is no reason to voice my opinion. And I think that put me in a place where I just knew that everything was going to take time. Everything takes time. You have to know that you want it, be patient with yourself, and work harder than anyone else. And for me to be an immigrant doing music, when for my parents at that point in time, being a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, an accountant, any of these things are so much more revered. than the arts, I just had this chip, I had this chip on my shoulder, like I'm gonna show you, and it's like whatever it takes. I mean, one of my jobs in New York was working in a factory where you bagged animals for research, for like
dead animals.
like for the labs and stuff.
Really?
To like cut them up
How
and
does
stuff
one
like
find
that.
job?
Well, I know, I can't remember. I just knew that it was gonna pay really good, and it was 10 hours, 6 hours a day, but it was in formaldehyde. So like you get out and you're just like,
oh my goodness,
like you smell. You smell 100% of that. But it that never defined, none of those things have ever defined me. I one of the things I love going back home is you see, we build houses with bricks. It's not, wood as you're in the US. And most times it's people literally pouring the concrete into this molds, waiting for it to dry, like walking up this 2x4 to get to this place, or the stairs, and set it. But that exact same kid, as dusty as he is, 4 or 5 hours down the road, is fully cleaned, dressed in his best, and out there being a Casanova in the streets. It never computes. Like what you do as a job does not define your value or your worth. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that so much growing up. Wow. And you find that's quite a difference here. It's like you lose your job and you lose your whole identity. You lose everything you stand for. Mm-hmm. And that's because, once again, there's a society that is kind of set up that way, where, you work 40 hours or more, and you have literally Saturday, because on Sunday you're getting ready to get back to that job again. So what do you do on Friday or Saturday? You get shit-faced, or you do whatever it is you need to do to reclaim some sort of
numb yourself to whatever.
Numb yourself, or say, I still have control, of what's going on in my life. So for me as a kid, I just knew that people weren't really going to see what I see of myself and where I know that I can get to. And sometimes that means you keep it all in and you just keep moving forward. And that's a beautiful thing. It pushes you. And then, just like everything in life, the seasons, at a certain point in time, it stops serving you. And I just turned 39, and I'm finally gotten to that point where there's been a lot of changes. I grew up in very, very secretive, you got to keep it wraps. Like your secret is your armor. You can't let someone know you're traveling, because you don't know if they're, they know the house is empty. So you don't know what's going to happen when there's, and we're just talking about the physical realm. There's a spiritual realm as well, because Nigerians, Africans were super, super, like superstitious, supernatural. There are all these other realms of things that I grew up with. So like you keep a lot of things to yourself.
That's so interesting. I'm fascinated by that. That's funny. My dad's just paranoid. Sorry, Dad. But I grew up like that too, where my dad was always like, don't do this. Like, don't, like, I grew up in that kind of world of being like, don't do this. Don't go there. Don't post that you're doing this, or be careful. And even now, like with what I do, I'm very cautious, but as like a female, but from what's been instilled in me, and like watching Taken and right. You get kind of but it's interesting because the way that you talk about it is not from a place of fear. It sounds like it's from a place of like, no, this is like, you keep it to yourself because it's just more of like, I don't know how to describe it. How would you describe that? Am I sensing that right?
No, you're right. You're right. Because
there's a lot of fear-based.
There was fear for a long time, mm-hmm. as a reason, as a factor why you have to protect yourself. And you show up in a different society, and you realize that while those are still true, the response or the result of having oneself open maybe it's not that drastic, but it doesn't change the fact that it is still true. You know, I have my father was a prominent man where I grew up, and if I back up a little bit, like I always tell people that like Africa is very much like rural America, which is reputations matter. Family name matters. Everyone is paying attention to what you're doing. And it's all about, you know, we must protect the sports type thing. And that was my mom's job for the longest time, is like protecting the reputation of this prominent man as the first son of a prominent man who is supposed to set the example for all the ones coming up, and even the unforeseen people people who you don't even know are, you know, or whatever, or like are present. Exactly. Yeah. Which creates its own pressure as well. Mm-hmm. It just made it that, you know, if I went to someone's house, then I was trained not to eat there unless I know who that person is, because if they can't get to my dad physically, they can get to my dad through his kid.
Oh my goodness.
They can get to my dad spiritually through his kid, or through this and that and that. Once again, it's a very superstitious and supernatural. It is real shit. So that was my mom's job, and my dad was mostly never home. So I was raised by this really badass boss woman who ran everything with love. Like, this woman, her whole idea was, if you add it to the equation, then it's not a problem. So there are moments where people can't afford to eat in certain places, and it's not like the US where you call someone and say, hey, I'm coming over. No, people just show up. And sometimes people show up strategically. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. And for her, it was like, well, you can make this a problem, or you can add it to the equation. So we would always cook for like 2 to 5 imaginary guests. So that way it's not a problem if they show up, and they are going to show up, and they do show up. So I just grew up like having this openness of accepting, of just knowing that you know what you know, and then you know what you don't know. And both are true, both are correct. And if you keep yourself open to that, then it's going to be all right. At the same time, that's a front that you're put in, at the face you're put in, but you're also so like onely tight in like what you protect, because it's all about still that reputation. It's still about like that, you know, how people see you, type of thing. So fear was part of it for a long time, until I just began to realize, like, yes, it's beautiful that I am, you know, this accepting person. And then there's another aspect of it where it's like, well, maybe I just need to tell you to fuck off, you know, like, because it doesn't serve, because it doesn't serve it. Yeah, because it doesn't serve you anymore.
That's what's crazy. Oh, that's so interesting, because I feel like those are two opposite, real kind of opposite, just ideations of, like you said, one from like protect, secretive, this, to like, okay, open door policy,
right?
You know, over kind of abundance mentality. Those are just two opposite sides. So it's like, where's the happy medium,
right?
You know, and where is that boundary that you put down to say, okay, no, because eventually, like you said, people do just start to take advantage or find, you know, different ways, or like, oh, this person's always going to just let me do this, you know? So how did you find, because that was something like I actually had to like go to therapy about, to like learn how to put boundaries down, because I never knew how to really like speak and communicate, and in conflict, I would just kind of like brush things off or act out, but I was never like that was my way of just being like, okay. And then I'd really like just do something, like find a vice or find something. And so it's like, how did you find your voice to have that boundary?
I mean, I'm still trying to find it, but therapy is a huge part of it. I definitely see someone. I recommend. Absolutely. That was the beginning. I remember earlier I was saying, you know, some of these things serve you, and then, you know, they end up becoming your prison. Was at a certain point I realized that for me, it became, I really wouldn't tell you what I felt, but I would write it in a song because it was a way for me to, it was still part of that overabundance, right? It's bigger than me because it's a voice of something that I know is going to connect with people. It's going to connect with people because people do go through that, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And if I felt like it was of service, then it was all good. If it wasn't of service, it was bad. Like it's that whole, if you don't have anything good to say, you don't say anything. Mm-hmm. That's true. I really do subscribe to that most times, but that doesn't mean I don't have anything to say. It just means that, you know, maybe it's not necessary at that point in time. Mm-hmm. But I just got to a point where I realized that I had this amazing woman who is overabundant, like just has this overabundance of love and everything. And sometimes to her, like detriment, to be quite honest with you. And her being my everything, I really absorbed a lot of that. And having the dad that I have, it was important for me at the same time to make sure that there was this, you know, perfectly woven tight image that you just upheld. And at a point in time, it becomes like, well, that's really not me, right? Mm-hmm. That isn't me. I am that and more. Mm-hmm. And it was important to begin to like state my, and I'm more, balance is like the hardest thing to do to get to the point where you can do that. The one thing they did, and I never ever thought about that until recently, was they made, like, you had to ask for everything. Like you would look at the cup or the pantry, there's food, 100%. But you never went and just grabbed anything from the pantry.
Really?
You had to ask for it.
Huh.
You had to ask for every single thing you got from the pantry. That was my ma's rule. And while I was so annoyed with that as a kid, because all my other friends, like that wasn't even a thing, growing up and being as, you know, where I am now, I understand that cultivated me knowing that nothing was ever going to be given to me. Everything was going to be like, you have to raise your hand and say, hey, this hurts right here. So whether she knew it or not, this really abundant, accepting woman at the same time, we're putting these lessons where it's like, you don't speak up for yourself, people are just going to run you over. And I think it took me a while to really get to that point. Even just the past few years, to be quite honest with you, because I'm good at putting my head down. I'm good at doing everything I need to do. I'm good at, quote unquote, saying not needing anyone. It's one of those things where it gets you so far. But if you are not even present, I think if you're doing a job or a career that has passion involved with it, it requires you to check in with yourself. And there's been a lot of checking in with myself where I'm beginning to realize, like, now, it's important to like also know how to carry people along in your journey. And my childhood and my experiences of just knowing that I have to toughen up and just bulldoze through whatever it is as silent as, you know, as possible, is a good, it's not a bad, there's never good and bad. It's just multiple layers to different things. And I'm beginning to be like, okay, I understand that story. I've done that for so long. What does the other side look like?
Yeah. You're speaking to it's so interesting how we grew up on different sides of the world, but I resonate with so much, like you're saying, my mom, that was like you said, that was like what's emblazoned in my brain, is she always just tell me like, toughen up. Like it was always, but I never knew how to ask for help. I was just like hyper independent with everything. But even then, that's until recently, I've had to learn how to ask for help.
Yeah.
Because that was something that, because I was listening to some podcast, I was talking to my mom, and your most formative years are when you're from like, I think it's like 4 to 6 and or 4 to 8. And so I was asking my mom, I was like, how was I like as between that age? And she's like, oh, you were so independent. You didn't ask for anyone's help. And I'm like, no, that's not good.
You're like, that's not it.
That's not good. But for her, it was like a sense of pride. Mm-hmm. My mom is a very like strong, independent woman. You know, like she did a lot. She worked a full-time job and came and like maintained the house and did everything. Had, you know, I grew up Mexican, or I am Mexican, but grew up in a very traditional Mexican household. So religion, very prominent, but also like, you know, you obey the man. And right. But then also my mom is like a badass in her job and doing what she's doing. So it was like this, for me, growing up and seeing that, being the oldest, seeing her, I'm like, okay, I see this woman that's taking care of herself and doing all this, but she's still has these roles. So it was kind of like you said it. It's like she was grooming me in the sense of like, I'm just like her, where right. she had a rough childhood in the sense that she had to learn how to take care of herself. So it's like, she was like, I'm going to give her all the tools to make sure that she takes care of herself, but that I've also realized that's to a detriment sometimes. Right.
In all of it, you know, it's like too much of
burn yourself out.
Yeah. Too much of really good food is terrible. You know? Like too much of anything at a certain point in time is just, it doesn't serve you. And while those are, you know, you find out that those are trying to make up for the things that they may have gone through in their life. And who's to say if I had kids, I wouldn't do the exact same thing? Who's to say maybe that's the reason why I don't have kids? I don't know any of those things, but there are aspects of it where you realize that people are kind of doing like the best they can, but there is so much learning from just suggestion, from just things we see. And it doesn't shock me at all that being, you know, from a Mexican family, traditional Mexican family, first is it's the old world, right? It's the old world everywhere you go. Like it doesn't matter where you are, if it's the old world and those hierarchies are set in place, they still almost always end up being the exact same way. Because that you know, before you could, you know, lock your door and have your alarm system, it was like you had to really pay attention. Like you don't just put things out. And I went to school for computers, so like there's the whole
yes, all these layers.
Yes,
just layers.
Yes. I went to school for computer information system.
Wow.
Because once again, it's the immigrants. It's like you can't just come here and do the arts. That doesn't make sense. You got to do something that makes money. And there is this word called
sales. That was the
medical sales.
I was like, if I get into that, I'll make money.
Yeah,
it wasn't fulfilling.
Yeah, there's the whole garbage in, garbage out. GIGO. It's a term. I don't know if it's still being used. I'm sure it probably still is. But you know, like when you talk about like social media and all these things, and actually you bring it back into your life, that's a lot ways where a lot of people, it's like there's a lot of things you keep to yourself, and there is nothing wrong with that. But once again, eating too much healthy food, just like eating too much bad food, is detrimental to you. The balance is the hardest. That's, I think, what everyone is really trying to find at the end of the day, is what's the commonality? Like, where do you get to where you're like, I'm good with this set of vices and self whatever, you know? It's a tricky thing. It's a very tricky thing.
Where would you say you are on that journey? Like it sounds, I mean, like you said, you just had a birthday. That's always like a very big kind of self-reflective space to be in. And I was stalking your Instagram posts and, you know, but cause I think there's a vulnerability there that you share and you talk to people, and it's easy to connect with you, but then at the same sense, in the same token, they don't know you.
Right.
So I'm sure you get that a lot. Absolutely. Too, people feel like, they know you, but then they don't necessarily truly. They know what you tell them.
100%. It's the quality of being a good listener is like you literally can just show up and have people just talk, and you know, at the end of the day, and as a writer, as a songwriter, as a writer, period, you know, there's so much information, there's so much things I'm writing that has nothing to do with me. Sometimes has to do with conversations I overheard. It's my favorite thing is just find a corner and just pay attention.
Really?
And just listen.
So that's what, so y'all know if you see him in the corner, he's listening.
That's exactly
he's
what's
taking
happening.
notes.
That's exactly what's happening. No, I'm where I am is very much, this whole year has been, with everything that has happened, and there's a lot of mourning going on in the world. I mean, literally, you can walk around, and I'm bringing it to the very basic, but literally, you can walk around, you can see all these agave plants that died from the snowstorm. They're literally everywhere, smelling like alcohol. You know, there is so much of that going, but at the same time, I think we were all forced to kind of sit with ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I started therapy a year and a half ago, or a year and a half, a year before the pandemic, and stayed with it all through the pandemic. And I am so thankful that I had those tools. I live alone because I was able to realize right from the get-go that that was an opportunity for me to just shut off everything. There were no keeping up with any Joneses. There were no shows coming up. There was nothing. There was no need to be on social media. There was nothing. There was just me and me alone. And I hadn't done that in a long time. And not even that I hadn't done that, I hadn't had the tools to be able to just sit by myself for that long. And I dove in. I literally dove in. I've read, like, I don't know, 28 books or so since then. Wow. And the year before that, I read 0. And the year before that, I read 0. But through therapy and trying to talk about all these things, because at a certain point in time, I really began to realize that it was true for me, what you had said, which is like, what people see is what I let them see. Mm-hmm. And while that is okay, if you work as a, I don't know, at a desk job, or you're a plumber or whatever, like I don't feel like it serves you if you work in the arts. I don't think it serves you if you're literally trying to figure out, like, what's the reason why I'm here, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's in a lot of ways, that's kind of what comes out in my music, just paying attention to the human condition. So I began to realize that the songs kind of weren't serving me anymore. Like I was saying this to a friend, and it's weird. Like I got to a point where I was jealous about people coming to the shows and it being so excited and released and feeling amazing when they leave, because obviously you're hitting a nerve. It's something that they've gone through. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's still the pain. And wow. Whether I'm there or not there anymore, it just wasn't jiving with where I was anymore.
Wow.
So I was just doing this over. Pandemic. This was before pandemic.
Wow. Okay.
So I was going through this whole overhaul, and was in a amazing relationship that, because of all the things that I had experienced before that relationship, the relationship, ended up, fizzling out. And for the first time in a long time, I knew that, felt like that was me. It would really, I'd never ever felt that. I never felt like, oh, I was the cause of this. And that was like a beginning of like, okay, so what is really going on? Like, there's a lot of things I haven't like dealt with. There's a lot of things that I needed to go back into, beginning to like, why is it that, you feel best when it's just you by yourself? Why do you feel like you can go much further when it's just you by yourself versus with someone? Like, what is going on with that? And just realize that all those things are things that you found a way to just push away and just lock in. Men are really good at compartmentalizing. Like, we are the kings or the queens of that, to be honest with you. Yeah. We are the queens of that for sure. Yeah. And so all that had led me to the point where when the pandemic hit, I was just like, oh, okay, I think I can do this. Like as long as I can, still pay my bills, which there's a part of that also that brings a lot of gratitude, because I know people who don't live in the United States where at the end of the day, pandemic or not, the rent is due. There's no mandate or bill set out there where the landlords can take a chill pill.
Right.
Like I realize that even at the very most micro level of things, I was doing better than most people. So that just made me, and it's weird, it kind of felt like a duty or a responsibility one way or the other to just make the best of this time for myself, not for anyone else, but for myself. Like, how would I look at this a year or two or whatever from now? And for me, that was just to learn how to like slow the fuck down and like reinvest in myself. So yeah, I took trips that I wouldn't take. I took like a 3.5 week trip. Greg Janukas was on the road while I was doing this as well.
Was he? Okay.
We literally were missing each other
Really?
on the road. But I took a 3.5 week trip, and I did the I-10, not I-10, but yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah,
Pacific
like
Northwest.
PCH?
Yeah, I did PCH all the way up to Bozeman, and put a mattress in my car, and just without a license. And this is like the height of George Floyd. Like this is like, there's so much going on. I am freaking out in so many ways. Texas is becoming the epicenter of COVID at that point in time. And like, anytime I went to certain places, I'll, turn on the radio and that's how your law enforcement are looking at your license plate and things like that. So I'm just like, I am really telling myself I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this, but at the same time, it doesn't change the fact that all these things are going on in my head. But I took that trip because I needed to do that for myself. I needed to sit with those freak out moments and know fully well that those are real, like real. But like putting my focus on what I would hope it to be is my best shot at moving forward through that.
Interesting.
Because my mom runs a school from like pre-K all the way to like college. So I'm Nigerian, but I grew up in Benin, République du Benin. It's like right next to Nigeria. It's French speaking. And that's where my mom lives mostly. Mm-hmm. So school was closed as well. And there were just these moments where like, okay, so you live in this country. Uncle Sam is taking care of you at a certain ballpark, and your mom, school is closed. Do you send out money home or do you travel? And I think pre-therapy, I think I would just send all the money home, which of course, it's my ma. Of course that still happens. But the choice I made for myself though, like, of course I'm going to do this, came from just realizing that saying no to certain things doesn't mean that it makes you this bad person. Right. As a matter of fact, guilt. There's that guilt. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how we all end up. We're raised most times, is like there's the guilt that gets added into like your value and who you are, and whether you're good or bad is based on how much you just overshare or overgive everything.
Right. To a detriment.
Yeah, to a detriment. Mm-hmm. I just really I knew that it was important. Like feeding myself was part of that narrative and of that story. So yeah, I took that. I picked up biking. Yeah, I really, because I realized that I had lived in Travis Heights area for about 7 years and I had never walked the whole trail. I had never walked the whole trail. Wow. Like my life is so busy. I was driving. You had asked earlier on like what's the story? Like what you tell people who or pursuing something that, you know, like literally I live in the dream state. Like my whole life, my whole career is this dream that becomes a reality with amount of work and tenacity and belief I have on it. And to keep that going, there's a lot of things we do. And for me, I drove Uber for like, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years. With no one knowing, because except people who jump in the car and be like, holy shit, I just saw you play a show. Like, what the fuck are you doing driving me? But it is true. It is true that you can play Bonnaroo and 4 or 5 hours before jumping into the van to go play Bonnaroo, you were driving Uber. Like, that is the state of what pursuing and pushing a dream really looks like. And for me, there was so much of between my personal things and my career and keeping a roof over my head that I really didn't have time. I had to schedule, you know, things with friends to make it happen. And it's like based on the first or the last ride or whatever. And so with the whole shutdown, and my mind was up, that's where the whole therapy comes in, because my mind was like, dude, you what? Just you here, not moving around, not doing anything?
Yeah,
like
you're constantly on the go.
Because I'm constantly on the go. So yeah, I started, you know, after 3 weeks of being like, okay, I think, you know, just walking out and walking outside is not going to kill me because there's no one else outside. I'm going to start, you know, taking some walks and like taking advantage of the fact that there's no one around anywhere and doing the trail, and then seeing people riding their bikes around. And then I got bike envy, and I'm like, I need to figure out how to get a bike. I hadn't ridden a bike since I was 14. But I was able to try that because there were no cars anywhere. There was nothing. I'm just like,
you're literally given like a blank slate. Yeah,
it's like world your oyster type thing. Although there's no human beings, and it feels like the zombies. It's about like I Am Legend. 100%. 100%.
Walking the streets.
100%.
Oh wow.
And now it's, you know, I bike like 12 miles every other day. Like there are all these little things that I picked up because there was never the feeling like, what's the next thing? I think the feeling for me was the next thing is going to be the next thing. And as a matter of fact, the next thing is exactly what I spend my time doing right now. And those were tools that I don't think I really could, you know, express as maybe as good as I have now if without all the therapy. Because I was able, like we literally were able to get into the studio, start working on this record, and finish the record, get on a bunch of other different ideas. I rented a piano like the first week COVID hit. I've always tinkered with it, but like literally got into it. I played 95% of the pandemic has been playing piano and like getting a rig to like record myself at home and all these things. And I just, and now we're at we're the end of it. We're not the end of it, but we're at a point where things are reopening and there are human beings around everywhere. And I feel like if I look, to look back at it, it was very much, I don't know if I spent it on anything else other than myself. And that itself was 100% the way I needed to do that for myself, was to do that for the next 40, 50, 100 years, whatever. I don't think we can live up to 139, but
you can try. Well, thank you for sharing that, because there's so much that this whole journey to like everything that you've done, everything you've gone through has gotten you to this point. And it sounds like it's all been done with this appreciation, and you do have this humbleness about you as well. Like it's not anything like, it's so funny you mentioned like, so I drove Lyft for like right when I quit my pharmaceutical job. I didn't have a car. And so I was like, well, how can I get, I'm starting this business. Like, how can I not buy a car? So I like did this rental program.
Right.
I was doing that. And I realized like, I was like losing my,
Right.
because I was driving. It like wore me down. That was one of the reasons why I didn't like my pharmaceutical job, was because it just, while the pay was good, it just was like wearing a jacket that didn't fit anymore. It's like, okay, you still have this jacket. It's a nice, expensive jacket, but I just don't, it doesn't fit me, and it was the skin that I needed to shed. And I remember doing Lyft, but I was just so I could have a car, because I was like, I need to have a car.
I did that too.
Yeah.
That was the rental program.
Yep.
I fully did that.
Rental program.
I 100% did that.
I did that, and I was like, I needed a car, so I understand, like, you got to do what you got to do. And everybody that, people that haven't had that and I don't know. It's not like a respect thing, but when you have to like figure it out, it's like, there's just that mutual like understanding. Like, you've got to dig your, heels in a little harder. You got to figure it out. And there's things that like, you don't have people to go and just, like you said, nothing's going to be given to you. And I feel the same way. That's why like there's, with everything that I've done, and, fortunately for like this podcast, Steve was the one who really pushed me, but it's like, one of my favorite quotes is, luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah.
Because that's 100%. Like, people think, that's why, like I said, everything, your whole journey is just super fascinating. And I know it's not even done, where it's just like chapters. You've had these different chapters in this beautiful book that's still being written in your own way too, which is really, really freaking cool.
Thank you. Yeah. It's, the beauty of it, it's like when you relinquish control and you just go based on what you believe is necessary for the moment that leads to the next step, you meet all these, like, that's where life is, right? That's where all the stories lie in. And I can't tell you, I keep mentioning Greg because
shout out
Greg and I
love we got to see him at the Jonathan Tyler show. Steve got to meet him and took some really cool shots of him. Yeah. Greg's amazing human being.
Yeah, he's we were talking and he mentioned something about, well, part of your story is also within everything that it's taken to get here and will continue. And it's true, there's just so many people, as you understand, that I've met while you're literally while you're driving. They are people that you meet and their interactions you have, and some of them, just like everything in life, grew all these branches. On this trip I took, one of the guys who I ended up like driving for a long time, I got to stay in his house during in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And I mean, I've met so many. I found out Zach Person had something at Photo House yesterday or whatever, and I showed up and I looked at the drummer and I was like, in my brain, I'm like, I know that guy. And he comes up to me and he tells me that in 2018, he was here visiting town with his girlfriend, and he had mentioned that he was a drummer. And I had told him, hey, listen, this is the place to be, because literally drummers are in 6 different bands here. And 4 months later, he moved here.
Wow.
And
where did you meet him?
Driving.
Wow. So you changed his life.
Driving something, I think it was Fasten back then or whatever.
Yeah.
And just to know that, like,
you had that impact on him. It was like a ripple effect.
Right. Over just a conversation. And I guess he said, like, I was really, really passionate about how I was explaining, which is, it's true. Like, in so many ways, I'm amazing. Still like that, 18-year-old kid who had this dream of like, I know I sound different than you. I know that I don't have, a backbone of like some grandpa or whatever where inheritance is going to drop or anything. There's none of those things, but I know that following what I believe I am here to do, and the message, which is love, tolerance, unity, human condition, coming from a place where I've seen it be that and not be that. You're right. Like it be because you look different than me, although in the rest of the world, people are like, well, you're Africans. And it's like, actually, sorry, you're Nigerians. Is like, well, there's still, right, you know, like there are the classisms and there are the caste and all these things within having seen that, and the experiences I've had in my life has just pushed me to a place where if I am going to stand if I'm going to stand on stage, if I'm going to have a platform, then there is already so much in this world that is separating us that I choose to make it be something where I am putting out a message of hope, of love, of understanding, not just of other people, but also within myself, because most times the biggest battle is really within, right? It's like what I think of myself versus what people see of myself. And, you know, there are good days where you latch onto what people see of you. And then, you know, there are days where you really can't find that, you know?
That's so true.
So living with that sort of intent is really it for me. It's really it in the music that me and my partner JT, I've played with him in like for 11 years now.
11 years, wow.
About 11 years now. And I'd always known him, like back in the Momo's days. He was in a band called Dirty Bird, and I loved the band. But at the same time, I have this thing of like not meeting people that I like. There's just something about it. There is, because for me, their work, what they do is enough. And sometimes I feel like you might be having a really shitty bad day, and it'll be my luck that I meet you that day, and all of a sudden, like, I can't really humanize with you. I really feel like that sometimes. So like, it's better to just like keep you that way. And he was JT, who is my best friend, has been, you know, was that to me, where it was like this amazing artist. But he was in a band and it was all great. And then, you know, I met we ended up like dating twins, and that's
that's what brought you all together.
That's what brought us all. That's what brought us all together. You know, and like, oh my goodness, all through it, you know, the music is still there, and it's still, yeah. That's what brought us really together. Cool. So you know, it's. You know, they say the whole take a chance thing, and
take a chance with twin.
I mean, okay, so like I'm never
gonna let you live that down. I'm never gonna let you live that down.
If I delve more into that, it really didn't happen. I was on tour.
It's a great story.
I'm just leave it right there. Absolutely. Yeah. If you want to find a writing partner that lasts for 12 years, get a set of twins. I don't know.
No, I'm sure there's more to that as well. But so you're like your latest single, can you tell us about that? And just kind of, is that part of a bigger project that's coming out soon? Okay.
Yes, it's part of the record that we wrote during the pandemic, which was one of those things where I felt like we were writing a soundtrack for the end of the world. It really did feel very much like all you really had to do, especially for someone who thrives in writing about the human condition. All you really had to do was like look out. There's just so much going on that it was so much cannon fodder for me to just keep writing. And Downfall is a set of a whole record, but the industry kind of felt like, you know, what industry? Like, what are we like? There was nothing going on other than just creating content. And Downfall is actually written about. It's actually written about Martin Luther King.
Really?
Because that's what that man lived for. He lived for love, for not just for people, and getting rights and being, there is Malcolm X, there is Martin Luther King, absolutely necessary. We need all those together at the same time. And I'm always fascinated by like this street is called. Mm-hmm. I'm one of those people who.
Oh, you just told people where I live.
Yeah. Oh.
We have to bleep that out.
Yes, please bleep that out.
We're talking about privacy and keeping things
please
secret.
Please bleep that out. Please.
Now everybody knows
please
what
bleep
street
that
I
out.
live on.
Oh my god. Okay.
It's okay.
I'm one of those people that research the names of streets because you don't just hand it out. Right. Like there's a reason why that name is on that street. You know.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
I'll tell you after this. We'll talk about the street. That's not from us. That's a whole other street.
So, for of course, MLK doesn't need. It's everywhere. You know, his name and his legacy is everywhere. And I just wanted to write a song about the message, which was, love conquers it all, and hate will be our downfall. And that's really where it all comes back to. But when you go into the lyrics and if I didn't say it, you probably would just be like, who's sweet, sweet king? But that is Martin Luther King. And,
amazing. That's really cool.
And his legacy is one of those things where I wouldn't say we do need that more of that message out there. There is obviously, every time you stick your neck out, there is a price that is paid. It just seems like it kind of brings me to, like, there's a song by Michael Kiwanuka who I love, and he has a song called Hero, and he keeps going, am I a hero? No. And the reason why he's saying that is, like, every hero that puts their neck out, there's a price you pay for that. However, that fruit itself lives so much longer and lasts so much longer, and sometimes have the ability to change worlds. And I just wanted to put that message out there. And it's the fact that it's happening, that it came out right now. Mm-hmm. I chose to put it out. We chose to put it out on MLK Day, but at the same time, a lot of the things we've heard from people, and of course, given the climate we were, I think it came out like a few days before it came out a few days after the storm at the Capitol. And I remember talking to this radio DJ, and she was like, dude, no better timing. But it wasn't about that, but at the same time, it also was about, what we've been dealing with in the world in the whole, mm-hmm. With just the extremisms of that we are experiencing. And sometimes I don't know how to deal with those things, and the best way for me to do that is to write about it. That's and amazing. To put it out there. And I believe words are powerful. I believe whether it's directly or indirectly, they're so powerful. And if you can turn on your, radio, or turn on a song and hear those messages, eventually it will connect with you.
Yeah. It
does connect to me. And, yeah.
So these upcoming performances, are there going to be some of these new songs?
Absolutely. The whole, we have a whole new set from. Oh my goodness, that's
exciting.
Yeah, okay,
so everyone that's going to these shows knows.
Yes, it's been really exciting because once again, people weren't working, so like we had band members that after a while we realized, like, okay, we're not gonna die by being around each other. But also that means that, you're taking care of your own. So you're not bringing whatever to me. We just rehearsed. That's like awesome. We did a lot of rehearsals to make these songs not only just be songs that were going to be in the new record, but like be able to perform these songs, which is a whole different thing, mm-hmm. From recording process to performing process. Yeah. And I am really, really excited. I am exciting. Stoked to be able to like bring this message out there. And it feels like a rebirth in a way, because we had all these plans of how this record was going to come out when it was going to come out. And now we're very much like, okay, well, let's just, as long as we keep creating and like keeping ourselves sharp, then when they come out that's going to do its thing when it comes out. Like, I think we, either a manager rolls in or we decide, that this is when to do this, but putting singles out at this point in time, because has felt like the way to do it. And I have friends who've put out records and they've done really well. Of course, a lot of established, well-known, like national and international artists have put out records as well, which they can afford to put out in that way. For us, it's felt like the best way to do that was go song by song by song, be it within 3 months, be it within 4 months, just be able to have a visual aspect or some story, and at the same time keep writing. Like that's really
exciting.
That's really good.
So is that what so I know you have a couple shows, and what would you say, what's the most exciting thing that you have kind of coming up?
We're playing ACL live for the very first time.
With Golden Dawn.
With Golden Dawn Orchestra, yeah. I'm excited about that. Lived here for 13 years, or 2021, so yeah, 14 years now. And I've never played there.
That's gonna be amazing. That's my favorite venue. Sorry, all the other venues, but ACL Live.
It makes sense.
It's magical.
Even nationwide, I don't know. Like there's just something about
so much history and
and it's the equipment, it's the spirit, it's the fact that I, once again, I'm this 18-year-old kid, Nigerian kid. Let's not, like that gets to hear these songs and perform these songs in the state of the art, everything, and know that it has been from like all blood, sweat, and tears from me and my partner JT, and I'm excited. I'm excited to play for a crowd that show up ready to go off. That's what I love about Golden Dawn Orchestra, and their crowd is that people are ready to like party, head to Mars.
Literally on another planet.
On another planet. And that's like the beauty. Growing up in Nigeria, rhythm is everything. Rhythm, Mexican family, it's the same thing too. Like literally it's rhythm. And to be able to show up in a place where people are ready to do that and still have the message, because we write songs and songs that haven't, that have some, I wouldn't say meaning, but just songs that have, I don't know. I have songs that I'm getting tongue twisted and tied because I'm like thinking of I've been thinking a lot about performance, to be honest with you. I'm thinking, I believe visualization is a big thing in life. And I've spent countless times just visualizing what that show is gonna look like.
Amazing.
And I'm like really ready to play for.
Well, I'm really excited to see you. We're gonna
Thank
have
you.
to go see that show.
Thank you.
How can people find you?
We're on, it's Kalu and the Electric Joint.com. Instagram is Kalu and the Electric Joint. The Twitter is the Spotify, the iTunes.
All the good stuff. We'll have all the links.
All the links, yeah.
To everything. And so I'll put your show schedule on there too. So make sure you're following Kalu, and we will see y'all next week.